So let's get into this. Are we dealing with dumb voters or are we dealing with uninformed voters? And I don't mean this in any way as an ad hominem dumb. I just mean, are we dealing with ignorance or are we dealing with lack of knowledge here? Which is the deficit that voters are experiencing, which leads them to vote for people that would do the opposite of what they want. We talked about the Obamacare contradiction. Most people like the provisions of Obamacare, but they still seem to be scared about Obamacare as this kind of hypothetical or broad umbrella for naming these provisions. Republican senators campaigned on repealing Obamacare, something that's not going to happen, and they did really, really well. I mentioned yesterday that in Arkansas, and this, ladies and gentlemen, listen very carefully to what I'm telling you here. Voters in Arkansas felt that the minimum wage was too low. So they voted to increase the state minimum wage to $8.50 an hour from a meager $6.25 an hour. They also voted in Republican Tom Cotton to be their new senator, who, while in the House of Representatives, voted against increasing the minimum wage at all. And after months of hesitation, he's kind of come around and said, well, I might be okay with a state increase to the minimum wage, but not federal. But if there was a federal one, I might be okay with the state doing its own thing that's different. What is going on that you realize you need a higher minimum wage and you vote for a guy who clearly doesn't think the same thing? What are we to make of this, Lewis?
I think it's perfectly possible that a lot of the people who voted for him just did not realize or did not know that he was firmly against this.
So they're voting for the R on their paper without knowing what the campaign issues are.
Absolutely.
2/3 of voters, Lewis, complained that the economy favors the wealthy. I'm shocked it's that low, but we did get a lot of Republicans in there, right? 2/3 means there are Republicans who agree with that. But at the same time, these same individuals who think that the economy favors the wealthy too much voted for candidates that would give more tax cuts to the rich. They, in many cases, oppose increasing the minimum wage. They blocked expanding Medicaid for poor people. They often want to repeal Obamacare altogether. Let's look at Wisconsin, where voters are not happy with the economy, yet they re-elected Scott Walker, the guy who destroyed that economy. Scott Walker came in promising to create jobs. He has seen a loss of jobs. He has destroyed the ability of labor to bargain collectively. And they re-elect him in spite of the fact that they're not happy with the economy. Look at what happened in Colorado. Half of Colorado voters who think that abortion should be legal in most cases helped to elect Cory Gardner to the Senate. Cory Gardner supports a personhood bill that would have the effective impact of banning most abortions. Look at Georgia. Most voters said that the economy was the biggest issue on their mind. They elect David Perdue, who as a corporate chief laid off thousands of people, and he actually expressed pride in the number of jobs he exported to other countries. Ladies and gentlemen, what are you doing? What are these voters doing? You are worried about the economy, and you elect the guy who was proud to export and outsource jobs.
The Republicans have done a great job of making themselves seem like they are here to represent your average American. So there's a lot of smoke and mirrors. There's a lot of lies, a lot of dishonesty and misinformation. But you have to blame the voters to some extent, too.
Of course. I just don't know if I'm blaming them for ignorance or for incompetence.
There's both. There are people who would fall into each category. There are people who would fall into both categories. It's a terrible situation.
This is a much more difficult uphill battle, ladies and gentlemen. I hate to break it to you. If you have to convince people that their views might be misinformed, that's one thing, right? If you just have to say to someone, oh, listen, if you thought that outsourcing jobs was good for the economy, let me tell you why it's bad for the economy. And then they could come around on that. But if they're already convinced of that and simply vote for the guy who's for it anyway, that's a way more difficult situation, Lewis, to actually get people to come around on, because you're really dealing with a disconnect that goes way beyond not understanding an issue.
And when you've got someone who's invested in something like that, they don't want to make it seem like they were wrong, and they don't want to, do a 180. Their pride is at stake at that point.
To put a final point on this, we have a new study that tells us that most people recognize that texting while driving is dangerous, and most people who recognize that still text and drive. What we're dealing with here is figuring out how can we get the people that already realize texting and driving is dangerous but are doing it anyway to stop texting and driving. If we can figure that out, we can figure out how to get people to stop voting against their own best interests. I don't really know what the answer is. I'm open to suggestions from the audience.